Welcome to our online class on modernism. We are going to continue our discussion of modernism and its traits, and again we're looking at two authors in particular here for the online class. Gertrude Stein, Miss Fern, Miss Skeen is the selection. Sorry about the confusion on the readings. I was all set to do Amy Lowell, and I was excited about doing Amy Lowell, but we're going to be doing Gertrude Stein. And also Dorothy Parker, and her short story, which was the O. Henry award-winning short story for the year, 1929, called Big Blonde. Back to sort of recapping what we were saying in class about modernism. Modernism is at its heart a movement that's, and remember, it's more than just literature. It's art, it's architecture. There's a modernist sort of piece of architecture up there, a house. Remember, see the clean lines, the kind of geometric shape and stuff, and the low, flat, long kind of horizon-hugging sort of shapes to the architecture. It's very cubic sort of thing. It's music, it's art, it's architecture, it's furniture. Look at the bottom there. That's a kind of a modernist piece of furniture. It doesn't look terribly comfortable, but they love these long, sleek lines and so on. It's a movement, an era that incorporated lots of different art forms, and it sought to provide sort of an alternative way of seeing reality that takes as its starting point this idea that reality itself really isn't completely understandable, or if it is understandable, it's on a very individualized basis, and each of us is capable of understanding maybe small bits and fragments, discrete units, individual experiences or images or elements, but putting it all together and making reality and making our lives and making the world make sense is nigh on impossible. And it's because of the sort of fragmented nature of human experience, the randomness, the chaotic nature of, the universe and all of those kinds of things. So it spans a number of different, and again, from World War II to about World War I to about World War II, or maybe a little bit thereafter. You see, for example, look at the bottom there, the famous painting, and it doesn't do it justice here with this video, but you should take a close look at it online, a larger, better example. The very famous painting, Guernica, 1937, by Pablo Picasso. It was a painting that was inspired by the right-wing fascist government. It wasn't quite the government then. It was a civil war going on in Spain in 1936, 37, and so on. But eventually the fascists under Francisco Franco won and became the dominant power there in Spain. They actually used help from the Nazis, this is prior to World War I, used help from the Nazis to try out new weapons, even on their own people. The fascist government, the fascist regime there, bombed its own people in a town called Guernica, and that painting is Pablo Picasso's modernist interpretation of what that bombing experience was like. You notice all the different elements there, the screaming, the open mouths, the animals, the horses, the death, all of this in an attempt to understand why would someone do such a thing? Why would this happen? What is going on there? But it's not just things that are just shocking. Modernist painters, modernist writers were interested in sort of alternate states of reality or perception. Take a look at Persistence of Memory, that 1931 painting over down the bottom left. Salvador Dali. It's probably his most famous painting, I'm guessing. It's not. I don't think it's his best, but it's one of the most famous. Salvador Dali was kind of like the father of the surrealist movement in painting. And this isn't an art class. I'm just kind of giving you little bits and pieces and samples and tastes of things. But surrealism loves to explore what alternate forms of consciousness or perceptions of reality are like, and dreamlike states are what they're really interested in too. There's a whole thing. You could take an entire class on surrealism. We're not going to do that. But Dali loved to show strange sort of dreamlike, nightmarish pictures, the kind of thing that makes you stop dead in your tracks and say, that's a clock, and yet it's droopy, right? It's kind of wilty and melty. It's really odd. And of course, the name of it is Persistence of Memory. Dali also made some films and did a whole bunch of stuff. He was quite a prolific artist. So was Picasso. And they were both interested in, but they're both modernists. You look at how different these paintings are, but they're both considered modernists. Why? Because modernism isn't a style. Modernist is an approach to things. It's an outlook. It's a drive, if you will, to understand reality in a different sort of way. So the simplicity of modernist design and architecture, furniture, and art forms is kind of a hallmark of it, but not always. Not always. It's not always simply. It's designed to sort of shock, surprise, alter, shake you up, to rattle your cage a little bit in some ways, right? And certainly the literature tries to do that. The writers of this period were also, just like the artists, just like the architects, just like the furniture designers, all these kinds of things, musicians, were trying to experiment with subjects, with techniques, and with forms that challenge the very assumptions of how we construct knowledge out of experiences. Now, again, break that down and unpack it just for a second. They're experimenting with these things. They're the subject matter, the way they're writing, the forms or genres, because they want to challenge our assumptions about how we construct knowledge out of experience. All of us have experiences in our lives, right? And those experiences shape how we perceive reality. They shape how we conduct our lives, our day-to-day existence. How we structure our day is based on what we've experienced before, right? I mean, we go into school or into work with a certain set of assumptions because that's the way we've done it for day after day after day in our daily lives. Modernists are wanting to shake that up and say, you don't know what you think you know. You don't know. There is not the kind of predictable, accurate certainty about life and about reality that you think you know. Or at least they're interested in exploring the bases of our knowledge, right? It's kind of a deep thing, right? It's a very deep philosophical thing, but that's what they're interested in doing. Well, let's talk a little bit about Miss Furr and Miss Skeen real quick. I'm going to move my face over here up to the upper left-hand corner if I can. First, a word about liver and onions. Okay, what do you mean? Okay, so let's face facts. When I was a kid growing up, my mother used to make me eat liver and onions every now and then, and I always wondered to myself, everybody hates this stuff. Why does anybody eat this stuff, right? Why does anybody like liver and onions? And yet, then you come along and you find out when you grow up, there's actually like one or two people that you know who really do like liver and onions. Lo and behold, Miss Furr and Miss Skeen, the liver and onions of, I hate to be that way, but it is a really important piece, whatever you want to call it, short story, prose poem, I don't care what you call it. But it is it's kind of like got a poetic quality in the way that it reads, and yet it's not in verse form, it's in prose, isn't it? So it's kind of a short story because it has a narrative, but then again, it kind of keeps going back on itself, and it's got refrains, so it sounds like a poem. Or you see what I'm talking about, where they're wanting to experiment with forms. You see, that's what the modernists are wanting to do. I guess it was kind of unkind to compare Miss Furr and Miss Skeen to liver and onions, but I'm not a big Gloria. I mean, I'm not a big Gertrude Stein fan. But what are its elements? Let's take a look at it. Repetition. Regularly repetitive. Repetitively repetitive. Did I say repetitive? Repetitive. It is, and it just annoys the heck out of students. I know it does. You had to read it. You don't have to read it again the rest of your life, okay? Liver and onions. You don't have to like it. But it is interesting on a certain level, okay? It repeats certain words: cultivate, pleasant, gay. They had a pleasant life. It was a cultivated life. They cultivated their voice. They were pleasant. They were gay. It was a gay, cultivated, pleasant life, and so on and so forth. But that kind of repetition is not just random, okay? Because the repetition, if you look at the way she creates sentences and alters sentences and really kind of plays with sentences, it loops around again. The narrative loops back and loops back around again and again, retreading old ground, but re-saying the same thing in a slightly different form each time. And I'll tell you why I think that. And it allows her to engage in a sort of transformative use of phrases. This piece, whatever you want to call it, short story or poem, I won't get into that argument, is the very first piece that takes the word gay as we know it today, meaning someone who is same-sex attracted, and puts it into popular culture as what we know it to mean today. Okay, gay meaning homosexual or lesbian. Okay, and prior to that, there's a big controversy as to whether gay people in sort of a subculture use the term gay, and if so, to mean homosexual or lesbian. And if so, for how long, and where did that originate, and all that sort of thing. There always has been a sort of underground gay culture, always. A lot of people don't realize this, but back when gay folks were really seriously oppressed, and as though they're not today. They are, of course, but back in the day, I mean, it was really something. I mean, you could be killed, so being discreet was very important, and they would use different phrases or code words that you would, if you were gay, you would know. If you hung out in that gay subculture, you would know, but an outsider might not know, for example. So one of the things after 1939, when The Wizard of Oz came out, don't ask me why, but one way to find out, for one gay man to ask another gay man, is he gay, in a public situation, is to say, "Oh, I'm very pleased to meet you. Are you a friend of Dorothy?" Meaning Dorothy of The Wizard of Oz. I have no idea why that was such a big deal in gay subculture, but it was. They would ask, "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" and which was code for, "Are you gay or are you straight?" And of course, if you knew what that meant, you probably were gay. So the word "gay" probably predated this text. There's no question in my mind. I mean, you can go and do the history and the proof of it or whatever. But here's the thing. Here's the really big thing. This text uses the word "gay" as a noun and an adjective. By the end of it, you realize that she's not just talking about being happy, okay? That there's an implication there, and it brings the word "gay" itself out of the closet, which is an interesting thing, right? She's using the word "gay" as a noun and an adjective. So now we have to ask, why all of these repetitive things? Why all of this stuff? What was she hoping to accomplish? What's the artistic benefit to doing this kind of stuff? Well, okay, so here's sort of my theory. We can read all this, and here's a passage, for example. There were she says, oops, back I go. Pardon this. She says, she went to see them where they had always been living, and where she did not find it gay. She had a pleasant home there. Miss Furr was a pleasant enough woman. Miss Furr was a pleasant enough man. Helen told them, and they were not worrying, and she did not find it gay, living where she had always been living. Right? The living. Why all of this? Why use this kind of thing? They stayed there, and they were gay there, and they were not gay there. They just gay there. They were both gay there, and they were regularly working there, both of them cultivating their voices there. They were both gay there. And it just, you're going, it's like pounding on my head with a hammer. What is she trying to do here? It's very experimental. I think that they're trying to replicate the experience of living and trying to know. Right? Take a moment. Let that sink in. Trying to know. Trying to know what? Trying to know, what does life mean? What do life's experiences mean? What am I supposed to take away from something that might have happened to me? Good, bad, ugly, whatever. Right? Trying to replicate the experience in this text of living together, living in a relationship, trying to be artists, and trying to know the world. Cognition itself, I would argue, in this text, is being explored. Cognition itself is being explored. Think about that for a moment. She does with words what someone fondling an object of interest would do in turning it over and over, looking at it from multiple angles or the same angle repeatedly, trying to get to know it, trying to understand it as fully as possible. Imagine picking up something on a coffee table that you've never seen before, and you say, "Well, this is strange." And you look at it, and you keep looking at it, and you keep trying to figure out what it is, and you look at it with your head cocked, and you look at it upside down, and you hold it up, and you say, "What is this thing?" And you hold it over here. She's kind of doing that with words, which is to say that she's saying it one way and then saying it another way and saying it slightly differently and saying it another way. And that dance with words, if you will, though it seems repetitive, you're going, what the heck is this all about, is really, I think, trying to replicate the very human experience of trying to understand our lives. Okay? Now, you can disagree with me. It's what I've always thought about this piece. I think it's why it's interesting, though it's not something I would read on a daily basis. Nevertheless, it's probably not liver and onions. It's just a very, very interesting meatloaf. Okay? So the next slide, we're going to talk about Parker.